Hi, Karen here, and in this special video for this week, I wanted to give you a free module of my Sustainable Homeschooling 101 course. Now, I picked this video because I get a lot of questions on this, and this is one of the kind of things that come up often during my one-on-one coaching sessions with parents is they want to know where to place their children on the book list if they've transferred over at a later age, but they feel like they're kind of missing out on some of those classics earlier in the list. And so how to balance that. So that's what this module is about that I'm sharing with you. So I'm going to be, transitioning over and playing that video for you now. If you're interested in the Sustainable Homeschooling 101 course, it's 26 modules, 3 phases, mindset, Robinson curriculum, and troubleshooting, where I go into depth on all those 3 subjects. Troubleshooting, just things that come up often, things that I hear often during coaching calls and with emails and things like that. So I deal with all of it. So I will link all the information below, and I hope to see you.
Welcome back to Module 8, where we talk about the RC book list and also how to make any changes to the list.
So let's talk about the RC book list. It goes from book 0, which is the foundational book, the King James Bible, all the way to book 157. So this is the spine of the whole curriculum, the core order. The RC Course of Study says that if a child can get through all these books, as well as all the math texts and the science texts, then they are considered a well-educated person. Now, there are, however, additional books in the supplemental reading list. I think there's 78. However, if you have RC Online, and especially if you have the GA Henty add-on, there is a lot more than that. See, the goal was never to run out of books for a child to read. So even if they were a very voracious reader and getting through all the information and they started, RC from age 5, there's still plenty of books that they would never run out of books to read. So don't feel intimidated or overwhelmed if you're looking at all these books and all these supplemental books and thinking, oh no, are they supposed to get through all of that too? No, that's just there for kids that need it, that need either more kind of filler books between the harder books before they get to harder material. If they still need a few fun books, that's what that supplemental reading list is for, and it also in case if they just get through everything. So that's what that's for. Now, the RC book list is made up, it's a mix of fiction, nonfiction, it's got all subjects, it's got poetry, it's got economics, it's got geography, history, all of it comes from the books. So the book list is very important. And a great way to just keep track of where they're at is to just print one out and write next to the book the date that they started and the date that they finished. That way you can kind of see, oh, okay, well, it's taking them now, maybe before it took them months to get through a book, now it's just taking them, 3 weeks, and it kind of helps you plan ahead the books that you will need. So that's how the book list is made up. So let's talk about making changes, and you don't have to make any changes. If you're perfectly happy with the way the book list is, then hey, easy, just go with it. However, for those parents that maybe they want to add some more modern books, or they're transitioning to RC and they're wondering if they really need all of these kind of filler books that are in there, do they really need to read them if they're kind of starting off late in the game? Or, if you just want to make some swaps, maybe you have a boy or a girl and they're not really into the boy books or the girl books. Should they read them? Should they read all of them? And again, if you want to add some newer books that complement RC, and I have a few favorites of those that I'll talk about, where to put those in. And we'll also talk about audiobooks and, should you read aloud some of the RC books? So let's dive into all of that. All right, so here's my list. Step number 1 is to delete, remove any questionable authors or books that you just don't feel right about having your child read. It's okay. You don't want to, make too many changes. The book list is very important, but I do think there is some wiggle room here so that you can have a win-win where you're happy and they're educated. So for me personally, there are just a couple of authors that have some really off-putting past. And look, I'm not expecting every author on this list to be a perfect Christian or even a Christian at all or none of that. The books do have great morals, great lessons. But again, I realize that imperfect people are writing them. However, there's only just a couple that really cross that threshold to where I do not want that person's mind influencing my children through their writing. Just a couple. And if you'd like to know who they are, you can message me at Karen at ourhousehomeschooling.com. So, find those books. If there's certain authors different people have different opinions on, if you don't want them to read them, just cross them out. Done. So you don't have to worry about those. Okay? Now let's talk about if you're transitioning over to the curriculum. We already talked about kind of where you place them. So let's say you're making the switch to RC at maybe 13 or 14. So you kind of figure out where they need to be placed. But you might be thinking to yourself, wow, but they really missed out on kind of some key important books. All right, well, that's okay. Go back to the list. You don't want to start them at the very beginning. Place them where they need to be placed. But go back in the list and circle the ones that you think are really important. In my opinion, it's the history books. They don't need to go back and read the Tale of Patty Muskrat or the Rover Boys or Tom Swift books, but maybe you think, I do want them to read one Tom Swift book to see what they're like if there aren't any more at the point where they're at. So maybe one of those, or one Little Pepper book and see if they really like it. Then they can continue reading the series on their downtime, or split up the 2 hours with an hour, hour and a half of the RC instructional book, and then maybe the last half hour with kind of a fun book, like one of those that they may have missed that you think still has some value, like the Swiss Family Robinson, or a Pepper's book, or a Tom Swift book. If they're, for example, 11 or 12 years old and you've placed them further down on the list, I would still say go back and let them read the McGuffey Second Reader, because it's just really great stories, great morals, great literature. I personally would not let them skip the McGuffey readers. I think they're very valuable. And you could tell by looking at the list that there are a lot of just kind of fun books. The point of that is to get them excited about reading, to get them excited about these stories. So if you're transitioning at a later time, don't feel like you have to make them go back and read all of them. Again, pick maybe just one or two, and they can read it at the end of their RC formal reading time or on their own time in the afternoon, evening. And again, if you're starting off further ahead in the list, I would go back and, if nothing else, just pick out those history books that they should still read. Now let's talk about swapping out books. For example, if you have a girl and they're really not into the Rover Boys books, I understand there's an alternative. There's the Outdoor Girl series, which is similar but just the girl version. Or you can substitute, some of the substitutions we've done are Black Beauty, Beautiful Girlhood, books like that. And I will leave a link in the PDF guide of some of my favorite kind of swap out books for the list. I think boys in general would be pretty happy with this book list though. Yeah, there might be one or two like Little Women, but I still think it's good to read it. And for girls too, maybe just at least read one Rover Boys books. And then if they really don't like it, then, make a substitution. But I have a daughter who really loves the Tom Swift books. So I would say at least make sure that they read one of those series books. You might be surprised. They might really like them. Now, as far as adding in some more modern books, I also have a few, favorites that I do want to incorporate, that I make kind of mandatory reading. The Tuttle Twin books and the new teen series that they came out with, that's really complementary to RC, because one of those Tuttle Twin books is based on The Law by Frederick Bastiat, which is in the RC course of study. So it's a great kind of prep in the earlier years for that more challenging read later on in the book list. And a lot of the Tuttle Twin books are based on the books in the RC Core Order reading list later on in the high school years, because there is a little bit of a bias with the RC book list, and that is a free market economy. So it goes really well with the Tuttle Twin books. Beautiful Girlhood is another one that I make as sort of mandatory reading for the girls. So you have a choice. You can either have that be just kind of additional reading in the afternoon or evenings, or maybe kind of kill two birds with one stone. If there are books that are kind of repetitious, or they don't really need, that many Rover Boy books, then you can swap those titles out with the newer books that you're wanting to incorporate. So for example, the Rover Boys on Land and Sea, they've already read 1 or 2 Rover Boy books. I would substitute there the Tuttle Twin books. That's just an example. So kind of look and see. I would never replace a nonfiction book, a history book, or a book talking about geography, maybe even the books on poetry. Okay, I would not replace those. But those kind of, the fun books on the core order, that's your wiggle room. That's where you can replace with newer books or alternative books that are on the same level of quality. Okay, I would never replace an RC book with like Captain Underpants. Okay, that's their fun reading time, those graphic novels, whatever, that's on their own time. But with RC reading time, keep it at a certain level of quality. Now, when it comes to audiobooks, I highly recommend that you have your students, your children, read the books on their own. However, there comes a point, I think it's just about kind of the Just So Stories or third reader, where, the intensity gets kicked up a little bit. And I do think that it would be helpful, especially with the growing vocabulary, to maybe just one chapter, right? Let them listen to the audiobook as they're reading the book. So they're hearing how words are pronounced. They're hearing the flow, the fluency. That's really going to be helpful once in a while. But I wouldn't let that be a normal everyday practice. And I know this could be a little tempting if you have children that have some learning challenges or they're struggling with this. Just stop and take the time, take all the time you need to teach them how to read, to help them with their reading comprehension. You have to. It's just the best thing that you can do for them before just kind of just wanting to get them through the list, with allowances like audiobooks. So again, that's a tool, but use it only when you really need it as a help, but not all the time, not every day. And again, I wouldn't kind of just play RC books in the car or during meals or at home. Leave those books really for their independent reading on their own. And this goes along the same lines for read-alouds. There are plenty of other great books that are not on the list that you can choose to be your home read-alouds. I would not recommend having RC books as family read-alouds. We have done it. 50 Famous Stories was a good one, I thought, to read at night. But in the end, you really want them to just kind of master and read those books on their own. And then, like I said, there's so many other books that you don't want them to miss out on. For example, the Little House on the Prairie series, that's a great one that's not on the book list that would make a great family read aloud. And there's lots of book lists out there. So that's your opportunity to take advantage. And I would say leave the RC book list for their instructional reading time. All right, so quick recap is to print the list. It will be your friend, one for yourself to kind of go through and make any adjustments, and then one for each student to keep track of their own just reading list, when they start and when they finish a book. So here's what I want you to do to take action. Like I said, print a book list for each student and put it in a sheet protector so that it doesn't get all beat up. It stays nice and clean, and they just take it out when they're writing their start and end dates. Decide ahead of time your changes. Don't kind of just start it and then, I don't know if I want you reading that book. Have your game plan right away in the beginning and try to stay ahead a couple of books of them. So when they say, Mom, I finished this book, you're not just caught in the headlights like, okay. Have a few books ahead of them prepared. And as far as record keeping, very easy. You can have a master list where you keep track. Just put the child's initial who has completed that book, and then each one has their own where they write the start and the end date. But you could have a master list where you kind of make your swaps and changes, or books you don't want them to read, and where you can just write their initial for each one that has completed that book. That's it for this module. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the discussion for this module, and don't forget about the PDF guide, and I'll see you in the next module. Now, don't forget, if you enjoyed this module, there are 25 other ones where that came from, and you can check it out in my Schoolhouse membership site. Link down below. I hope to see you there.